Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And I don't know what the title of this video is just yet. Something about the games I rated a 5 or the 7 games. I'll figure out the title later. This is not the time or place. But effectively, what is this video? This video is going to be the games, the 7 games. Of course, there's going to be 8 because me. But the 7 games that I rated a 5 out of 5 in 2021 so far. I've done a lot of reviews in 2021. I don't remember the exact count. I'll have to add it up. But I'm putting out 3 or 4 a week. Way more than I probably should. I need to slow down. But I am playing a lot of games too, so it all kind of works out. But that said, from all those games, I have given 7 of them a 5 out of 5, and 4 of them were in the past month. June or May, I guess. May was a very strong month for games. June's looking okay. Nothing, nothing bad. Not nothing bad. Decent selection of games, but no 5s really showing up in June. I am curious how Assassin's Creed will do. I'll be playing that shortly, and I don't really count. I do have Chronicles of Renegade Apocalypse, but I guess that one could be, because I rated the base game a 4 on the off chance that the sequel improves, then maybe, I don't know, we'll see. Neither here nor there. The reason I'm doing this video is because I've had a lot of people, a surprising amount of people, over the past few weeks asking me in comments, should I get The Witcher or should I get Fall of the Mountain King? Should I back Mosaic or should I back, I don't know, should I buy Destinies? Or Alex, should I be hunting down an all-in pledge of Destinies, which is going for crazy prices online right now, or should I back The Witcher instead? And those are complicated answers, except for the one where you hunt down an expensive pledge of Destinies online. Get the version of the game, get the retail version of the game when it shows up again, when it's reprinted. You can wait for the next 2 months without getting it. It's all good, and then you'll play it then. Don't pay inflated prices. That's basically that. But in any case, going back to the questions. So I've been answering these questions a lot when they come up. I've been addressing them when I can, but I figured I would do a full video talking about the games that I've rated a 5 in 2021 and my general thoughts on them, both in terms of which ones I'd recommend to you and why, which ones I'd choose over one another or why, as well as my own personal ranking of those games. Now understand, my personal ranking of those games is going to be very subjective. Some of these games I've played 4 times. I might need more plays. Whenever I'm doing lists down the road, I may change the list, and also some of these games I won't have a chance to play again until the production copy arrives. So I'm ranking them for now based on what I know about them now. And the reason I said there's going to be 8 games is because, for a reason which we'll get to later in the video, I'm also going to include Rainbow Six Siege, or a 6 Siege. It's called 6 Siege from Mythic Games, inspired by Rainbow Six. I'm going to include that one in this list as well, even though it got a 4. And I'm not including the other 4s, I'm including that 4 for a very specific reason. So let's get into it. So to begin with, what are the games I rated a 5 out of 5? And I'm going to do this in order of when I ranked them, when I rated them. I did Primal back in January. Primal, over here, got a 5 out of 5. Wild Assent, I don't remember exactly when that was, but somewhere between January and May, I guess, got a 5 out of 5. We have Aquatica, got a 5 out of 5. That was, I believe, after Primal, if I'm not mistaken. And then all in May, we have Destinies, followed by Destinies over here. We have The Witcher, which I no longer have the copy in front of me, so I can't do anything with that. We have Fall of the Mountain King, same story, no copy in front of me. We have Mosaic, which I still have. And then finally, we had 6 Siege, which again, copy is gone by now. But all of those, well, with the exception of 6 Siege, I rated all of these a 5 out of 5. Those are going to be the games, and 6 Siege I gave a 4 out of 5, with the potential for it to get to 5, but I'm just not sure if it'll see the table enough. 2-player games, 2-player strategy games that are in the 2-hour range are a little harder to get to the table frequently enough to benefit from all the things I think 6 Siege did particularly well. And so let's get into them. Let's talk briefly about those games. Because all of them, which is interesting, something I thought was very interesting with them, with one exception. I kind of had to squeeze Wild Assent into a category, but the other 8 games easily fell into specific categories that I can recommend for you based on what you're looking for, depending on what you're looking for your collection. It's not like I had 4 of the best Eurogame or 3 of the best Dungeon Crawler. I didn't. These are all very unique games in what they are bringing to the table. And each one, I think, is best in class in its category to a degree, which I thought was fairly interesting. There's some overlap, don't get me wrong. Aquatica and Mosaic are both going to have some degree of tableau building, although I'd argue Mosaic's much more of a tableau builder, and Aquatica's much more of a short, fast-paced game. They all have a specialty, so to speak. Again, Wild Assent had to squeeze in a bit, but we'll talk about each one. And so let's go over these. Let's go over a brief overview of these games before we go into the recommendation aspect of it. So to begin with, Primal. Primal is going to be a boss battler game. It's basically going to be Monster Hunter without the Monster Hunter IP. It is a game where 2 to 4 heroes effectively team up to take down a variety of monsters as you go through it. You have single-shot adventures, you have campaign mode, and you're going to be upgrading your weapons and gear as you go along. You're going to be fighting on a singular battle board as you go round and around and attacking each other, attacking the monster, so to speak, and then leveling up across the campaign. I've only had the opportunity to play 2 scenarios. I've played it like 4 or 5. I think I played it 5 times. I played one boss 3 times, the other boss 2 times. I only had 2 bosses to fight against in the prototype, but I am very excited for what the full game brings. Then we have Wild Assent. Wild Assent, I have since played through an entire campaign, 10 missions, technically 11 because I did play a single starting mission with another group of people, but I've gone through, I guess, 10 games in one campaign, and then 1 game starting off another campaign that I don't think will ever finish, practically speaking. I'll probably just start again myself. But Wild Assent is going to be a game where 4 heroes are going to be tackling the wilds, going through the wilds, and then fighting against different, well, enemies that you're going to encounter. It's not a boss battling game because you're going to encounter multiple enemies that you're going to fight through. And then I guess there are some scenarios with bosses, but most of the time you're fighting against a variety of enemies. You're going to be slowly but surely across 10 missions, upgrading your character, unlocking new skills, unlocking new helpers, new gear, new everything in this game as you take on more and more difficult monsters. The game sequence is primarily going to result in you taking actions, then attacking, you move, attack, back and forth, but it's the tactical aspect of which abilities you use, when you use them, where you move, how you position yourself. All those things are going to result in how well you do in Wild Assent across the game. Then we have Aquatica. Aquatica is going to be a lighter tableau build. This is going to be the shortest game of the bunch over here. It's going to be a game where you effectively are trying to, well, slot cards into your, well, it's harder to explain in short, but it's a game where you're going to be building up your hand, and like games like Century Spice Road, like games like Concordia, you're playing a card to take an action. That's your turn. Play a card, take an action, then one of the cards in your hand is take back all your cards. From there, you're going to go ahead and try to do various things. You're going to be fighting to conquer different sea locations, or perhaps buying different sea locations. You're going to be acquiring new cards that will help you take more or better actions. Along the way, depending if you play base game or expansion, you'll be fighting for different types of objectives that will give you points. Different types of objectives. Again, base game and expansion give you 2 different ways to play the game, and you're sliding cards up to take advantage of bonuses. You're going to have manta rays, as well as the cards you've captured or conquered or bought that will effectively give you bonuses along the way, and it's a little bit of a puzzle trying to figure out how to most optimize your board, which goals to go for, when to slide up your cards, flip your mantas, and take which actions in a way that results in you winning over your opponents. Destinies. Destinies is going to be a narrative-based game where you're going to have degrees of mechanics in the game. You have skills, you have tests you can take, there are choices you can make, equipment you can get. There's going to be a bunch of mechanics in the game, but I would argue the core mechanic of Destinies is going to be storytelling. It is a game that you will go through an adventure, you'll encounter people, you'll make choices, you'll engage them in one way, you'll wander around the map somewhere else, you'll make another choice there, you will lose gear, you will gain gear, you will lose stats, you will gain stats, you'll be making choices all along the way, until ultimately one player achieves their destiny before all others. Then The Witcher, which I don't have. The Witcher is going to be an adventure game, a game where you, as a Witcher, are going to wander around the map in either solo, co-op, or competitive mode, depending on which mode you play. You're going to be fighting monsters along the way until one player achieves 4 trophies. Along the way, you can fight other Witchers, you can play poker with other Witchers, you can build out and develop your deck in this, well, deck-building game. You can have encounters that will be reminiscent of choices you would make as the Witcher. I wander into a bar and something happens. Do I go to sleep? Do I ignore the ruckus, the fight outside? Or do I go deal with the vagrants and deal whatever? You can make choices that have consequences in this game, a little bit of abstracted storytelling in this single-shot game. That's going to be The Witcher. From there, we have Fall of the Mountain King. Fall of the Mountain King is going to be the area control game of the bunch. It is a game where you are basically these trolls trying to stop the mountain from being overrun, but this takes place, well, it's a prequel game taking place before in the Hall of Mountain King, and to that end, it is one where you know that you're going to be overrun. The question is not if, the question is when. Across 3 rounds, you will try to survive as long as you possibly can, taking a variety of actions. You're going to be building out this special tableau of actions that you can take, this sequence of cards that, depending how you slot them, will give you better or worse, well, action taking when you get to the action taking part of the game. You're going to take actions to bolster your troops, you're going to take actions to move around the board, you're going to take actions to gain control over various trolls, to gain influence on more and more trolls, or perhaps to influence the gnomes. All of these actions are going to result in a puzzle of you trying to figure out the best way to get points in this game. It is area control, but it's also control over the trolls. It's also control over the clans with the votes you get. Lots of small, tough decisions to be made in this game as you wander your way across 3 rounds to scores in the hundreds and hundreds of victories. victory points in this game. Next up, we have Mosaic. Mosaic is going to be a game that is a tableau builder. It is not a civilization game. I foolishly called my title for my review the best civilization game I've played, or the civilization game I'm looking for, something like that. It's not a civ game. It's an abstracted civ game. Am I very happy with it? I mean, obviously I gave it a 5 out of 5, but granted, those looking for a 4X game are likely going to be disappointed. Rather, I would say if you like Terraforming Mars, Mosaic is Terraforming Mars Light. Mosaic is a game where you're going to be acquiring technology cards, and every round you take one action from 8 different actions. Most of those actions are going to be, well, taking cards, either building cards, represent the various spots on the map, which there is a degree of area control in this game, so there is abstracted civ stuff, but abstracted is the key word, because yes, you can pop up a civilization over here, as well as that you can immediately build a city over there, you can build a city over there. It may not be wise to do so, but you can do so. The concept of spreading out in a 4X game, absolutely not happening here. But past that, Mosaic gives you a lot of choices, a lot of technologies, a lot of pathways you can take, a lot of rewards you can go for. You're ultimately trying to gather cards, to get more cards, to get abilities, to build your tableau, to get more cards, to build your tableau, rinse and repeat until eventually game end is triggered, and one person has the most points in Mosaic. And then finally, Six Siege, which is going to be a tactical skirmish game, bringing you the feel of the PC game, the feel of a first-person shooter. That's not entirely true. It's going to bring you the feel of the game, not so much the feel of the first-person shooter. That part's still very heavily abstracted. First-person shooters in video games do not really work, so to speak. But it's going to give you a lot of the other elements of the game. It's going to give you that tactical aspect. You can have attackers as defenders. You're going to be setting up the board, trying to prep your various equipment that you're going to bring to the table as defenders. Meanwhile, the attackers are charging through walls, planting explosives, taking out your gear, all while trying to achieve their objective, whether it's area control across a control map or whatnot, whether it's the bomb, trying to set a bomb to arm and then have it go boom, or alternatively, I think actually defenders having it go boom, attackers trying to disarm it, or alternatively, dealing with a hostage situation. All of those are just basically a goal, an objective to work around as you slowly but surely try to kill each other, or alternatively accomplish your objective across 5 rounds and perhaps overtime in a game loaded with skills, equipment, gear, a lot of external things that affect this game of chess going on your table. And that's an overview of these 8 games. And I still haven't explained why I'm bringing a 4 out of 5 to this list, but we will get there. So, I'll get there when I talk about my rankings and my ratings, so we'll talk about that. So let's get into it. Why would I recommend these games to you one over the other? Let's take into account everything. And before we do, let's understand the fact that some of these games, let's go through each one. Primal, the Pledge Manager should be opening soon, so you should have an opportunity to get that one soon enough. Wild Assent, while it's not available, Wild Assent Levon Rising, I'll throw a link to all these things down below if I have them. Wild Assent Levon Rising is currently on GameFound, coming soon, so you'll have an opportunity to get Wild Assent then. Aquatica is a retail game. You can get that anytime you want. Destinies is currently out of print, but will be available to buy soon enough, I'm sure, because publishers like money, and this game's going to sell like hotcakes. We have The Witcher. The Witcher is going to be, well, it just ended, literally just ended on Kickstarter, but rest assured there will be a Pledge Manager coming soon, so that will happen. You'll be able to buy it then. Fall of the Mountain King is the only one of these that's currently ongoing. I guess you can buy Aquatica and Fall of the Mountain King. The rest you have to wait for a Pledge Manager or wait for the Kickstarter or a GameFound to arrive, but Fall of the Mountain King is currently active on Kickstarter for like another week or so, and then of course there'll be a Pledge Manager as well. Mosaic just ended as well. There will be a late pledge. There always is for this company, or there always has been for this company. I'm 90% sure. I say that with mostly confidence, but now I'm not entirely sure. Either way, I'll throw a link, and of course it'll go to retail as well, with a slightly stripped down version. And then finally, Rainbow Six, geez, you gotta stop calling that, Six Siege. Six Siege is going to be the last of the bunch, and that one is coming to Kickstarter soon. The date is not yet set. I'm guessing either really late June or early-ish mid-July. I don't know, we'll figure it out, but coming to Kickstarter shortly. I'm pretty sure it's Kickstarter, not GameFound. Yeah, it's Kickstarter. So those are all available to buy. They're still available to make decisions, even though some of the Kickstarters have actually ended. And with that, let's go through each one. Primal is going to be the best Monster Hunter game. Now let's start off the bat by eliminating some things depending on your budget. If you're not willing to spend, well, $200 plus, Primal is not for you. Primal is going to be the most expensive entry point on this list, factor that into your decisions. While many of these have more expensive price points all in, they give you better entry points. For example, The Witcher, you can get it for, a roughly $84 all in, if I'm not mistaken, plus shipping and whatnot. That's not cheap, but it's certainly cheaper than $200. Although, on the other hand, the all-in can run you upwards of $400 for that game. So price is going to be a factor in all of these things. I will touch upon price as we go through them, but ultimately Primal is the best Monster Hunter game in the bunch. If you're looking for a Monster Hunter experience, I highly recommend Primal. If you like Marvel Champions, I highly recommend Primal. It's going to have that tactical card play, giving up cards, each card being used to pay for other cards. Primal is an excellent puzzle of a game that you'll be upgrading your gear, that you'll be fighting against a monster. Each monster feels different. Take that each with a grain of salt. I've only faced 2 monsters, but if they make any of the rest of the monsters feel at all different the way they did those 2, then I'm looking very much forward to what Primal brings to the table. So yeah, if you're looking for a boss battling experience, Primal is going to be the one for you. Wild Ascent is the one I had to kind of push into a spot, and the spot I specifically pushed it into is the best powers and abilities game. You see, I don't think it's the best skirmish game. I think 6 Siege will take that, but I do think that that Wild Ascent brings you a solid skirmish game to the table. I have not played the head-to-head mode, by the way. There is also a head-to-head mode. I've only played the cooperative mode, well, solo, against the creatures you're trying to capture, so there is worth noting there's more game in the box than I've actually experienced. But Wild Ascent gives you a ton of upgrading powers and abilities in the game. Across 10 rounds, you're going to have your encampment, you're going to upgrade your encampment, you're going to upgrade your characters, you're going to gather more and more resources. In terms of just having that powers and abilities escalating across 10 different games, each game running 60 to 90 minutes or so, combine the encampment phase, let's call it 90 minutes plus with the encampment phase. It's a ton of fun stuff to do in this game, a ton of fun ways to upgrade. And by the way, if you have everything, a ton of characters. I am overwhelmed by the amount of content this game has. Just tons of different characters I want to experience, tons of different pathways, tons of ways of combining the characters. If you like this game, there is a lot of game here. There's a lot of game to go through in Wild Ascent, a lot of ways to play, a lot of ways to upgrade, a lot of ways to combine your characters to fight against different monsters. There's just a lot in terms of that aspect of powers and abilities, upgraded across 10 rounds, a lot of gameplay. That's 10, 15, 20 hours of gameplay as you get to develop and augment and build upon your characters before rinsing, starting again with another group and a different combination therein. Aquatica. Aquatica is going to be the easiest to get to the table game. Because more so than any game on this list, including Wild Ascent, which I've played 11 times, Aquatica is the game I have played the most, coming in at roughly 30 to 60 minutes the game time, depending on base game, depending on the expansions, depending on the players you're playing with, the player count. This is coming in roughly 30 to 60 minutes for games of Aquatica, and every single one is so accessible. There's a single shot adventure where you build up your tableau in a little miniaturized tableau. It's not an extensive tableau, but you rapidly go through churning your cards, taking actions in this game. It is easy to table. It is rewarding in the puzzle it gives you. It is the best easy to get to the table game from all the other 5 out of 5s I have here. Then we have Destinies. Destinies is going to be the best story game. If you're looking for something that is more narrative based, if you're looking for something that will actually pull you in terms of the choices you make. Now, I haven't played it solo, and I've heard negative things solo, so take that into account. Well, negative is the wrong word. I've heard mixed things solo, but I have not played it solo. I've only played it at 2 and 3 players, and I've enjoyed it at 2 and 3 players. That aspect of going through the game, of trying to get to your destiny before other players, of kind of paying attention to other players' stories for the hints you need to accomplish your own destiny. Destinies is giving you mechanics, sure, but it's not why I would tell you to get Destinies. I would tell you to get Destinies because it brings to the table a solid story, a solid journey. It is a game that I will go through each thing, and while there is replay, I can fight hard for the reason why each of these stories is replayable. I would argue for myself, I don't plan on replaying it. I plan on going through the entire Destinies, all the expansion I have, going through all that stuff, and then waiting for the next Destinies, because this game will do well enough that there will be more Destinies. Just like there was more Chronicles of Crime, this game is going to outperform Chronicles of Crime, I guarantee it. It is a solid game. Not for everyone. Story-based games never will be, or no games will be, but nonetheless a solid experience. Then we have Witcher. The Witcher. The Witcher Old World, which is going to be the best adventure game of the bunch. The Witcher Old World is bringing you that aspect of story of exploration. It's not a dungeon crawler, but it is an adventure. It is you wandering around the board, upgrading your character, not to the same degree of Wild Ascent. It is, after all, a single-shot game, but still leveling up your character, upping their stats, engaging in combat with monsters, and then going through an adventure with choices, with decision, with a degree of story, enough story interwoven that those looking for the story will feel rewarded, and yet not so much that those who don't want it won't be that much of a turnoff. I say that much of a turnoff because there's still an aspect of reading a story card that players will have to sit through, or just skip to the end or something. Spacebar, 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 spacebar. That kind of situation. But The Witcher is bringing you that aspect now. And keep in mind, The Witcher, the campaign, brings you so much extra stuff. The campaign, the Kickstarter, brought you a ton of extra stuff that I have not personally gotten to experience, but I am very excited about experiencing those things. And so The Witcher is going to be the best adventure game of the bunch. If you're looking for a solid adventure game, if you don't have solid adventure games, then The Witcher is going to be for you. Now, Fall of the Mountain King is going to be the best area control game. Fall of the Mountain King brings you a lot of area control, a lot of decisions, and the area control is not purely located to the board. Like I said, it's on the board, it's on the trolls, the champions you're trying to influence, and it's on the voting track, the clans that you're trying to gain the most influence in as well. There is a lot of tactical positioning going on in this game across 3 areas, across 3 spheres, as you try to figure out the puzzle presented to you. But then in addition to that, you also have the puzzle of building out your own action selection mechanism as you play through Fall of the Mountain King. There are a lot of fun things to go through in Fall of the Mountain King, a lot of fun aspects of the game. It is one that it doesn't have the fighting aspect of a game like Kemet, of a game like Blood Rage. It doesn't have that, but it does have just enough fighting that it's still present. I would argue it's almost more like a game like El Grande. It's about that positioning, about that movement of your pieces around the board, getting more pieces on the board, but then also having them in the right zones as you go through. Just enough combat, just enough other things happening that pieces are being removed, but it feels more abstracted. It feels abstracted like a game like El Grande. It does not feel like combat, like a game like Blood Rage, Kemet, Cyclades, etc. Fall of the Mountain King is going to be the best area control game of this bunch. We have Mosaic. Mosaic's going to be the best tableau builder. As you go through Mosaic, slowly building up your ability to build anything, your ability to build ideas, to build resources, to build food, to upgrade your population, to gather more cards, more technology, to build across the board, gaining that area control aspect too, because there is area control in Mosaic as well. Not as good as in Fall of the Mountain King, but certainly a part of the game that you have to pay attention to if you ultimately want to win the game. Mosaic has the best tableau building from all these games. Across roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours, you will play Mosaic, you will make choices, you will upgrade your tableau, and you will constantly be wanting to and trying to do more in this game, and it will feel rewarding while you're doing it. Every action lets you feel like you're doing more. Every decision lets you feel like you're doing more. Everything that happens in Mosaic is about being better for yourself. Granted, you might not win, as I still have not won, but you'll have fun not winning. Yeah, it sounded better in my head. And finally, we have 6 Siege. 6 Siege is going to be the best skirmish game. 6 Siege is bringing you a solid skirmish game, 2 players head-to-head. There is a 4-player mode. There might even be a 3-player mode. I don't actually know for sure. But ultimately, for myself, at least as of right now, I am only looking at it as a 2-player game, as a 2-player experience. As 1 player tackles a defender, 1 player tackles the attackers, and you set up your defense. You run around the board, you position your doors, your breaches, all those things, your equipment that you brought to the table with the various characters you chose, and then the attacker starts charging in, starts blasting down walls, taking out your troops, setting up Overwatch so that they can react to whatever you do next. There are a lot of decisions to be made in 6 Siege. And then in addition to that, you can effectively play this 2 ways. You can play it as a pure skirmish game where you're going to ultimately just go head to head trying to figure out the best move to make, or you can play it with the timer. You don't have to play with the timer. You can completely ignore it if you want. But you could play with the timer. The timer will change the pacing of the game. Having a timer on you kind of gives you that FPS feel. It gives you that first-person shooter feel because it stops being about pure tactics and strategy and min-maxing the perfect move and instead becomes a little bit of a panic. I have to run here and try to shoot here and get this all done because if I'm not doing it fast enough, I will run out of time and not be able to activate the rest of my units. And so to that end, 6 Siege gives you both a standard skirmish game and then a fast-paced FPS feel skirmish game, both of them being incredibly rewarding what they're doing, allowing you to tailoring the speed to whatever you want, allowing you to tailor different speeds to mismatch for different opponents being stronger or weaker in the game, which I think is essential in a game that could so otherwise be overpowered by someone just knowing the game better, being better at that game. 6 Siege is easily the best skirmish game of the lot here. That's going to be my overall recommendations to you. I would say that, well, recommendations is a loose term. I gave you the best category they're in. What I would recommend to you is in terms of picking one over the other. What I've recommended to various people who've asked me in comments and videos which one I recommend. Ultimately, it comes down to which spot in your collection do you think needs the most filling. So, for example, I had someone ask me, Fall of the Mountain King or The Witcher. I said if I was answering that question blindly, if I didn't know anything about your collection, I'd answer Fall of the Mountain King because it's cheaper, it's a solid game, and I personally prefer area control as a genre. But for myself, I'm taking The Witcher because I don't have any adventure games that come close to the feeling that The Witcher gives me. Whereas I do, much as I love Fall of the Mountain King, I do have a bunch of area control games that fill that slot in my collection. So I think these answers are customizable, both based on your budget, based on what other games you prefer in general as a genre, based on what other games you have in your collection, what slots you're trying to fill. So I gave you the slots, I gave you the categories, and I'm going to give you my own ranking through those categories. If I had to pick them each one, which would I pick and why? And I'll go through the reasoning as to why it's lower or higher on the list. And before I do, the reason 6 Siege is on this list, the reason I put a 4 to 5 on this list is because 6 Siege is a game that I gave a 4 out of 5 and not a 5 out of 5 primarily because I don't know if I'll be able to enjoy it or appreciate it as much. That 2-player slot, that longer skirmish games, they don't hit the table as much, and as much as I enjoyed it, doesn't have a solo mode. So, for instance, Wild Ascent could have been almost given the same reason. A campaign game that is less likely to hit the table should also be dinged to a certain extent. But I did finish a campaign of Wild Ascent in the first, 3 months of having it, so it does get that 5 out of 5 nonetheless. But that aspect of accessibility will limit my own personal rating of a game. But if Six Siege is a game that does see the table, then I think it could become a 5 out of 5. It's one of those things that was on the borderline, so I kind of wanted to include it, especially because it is best in class at what it's trying to do. So, with that said, let's go through these all. Six Siege is obviously my least favorite of the bunch. If I had to pick from all these games, I would pick Six Siege last. And the reason for that is because, like I said already, I am skeptical that it will cede the table time enough. I'm getting it, to be very clear. I'm getting the game, and I plan on going all in it. But if I were getting rid of these, if I were choosing these games in the least accessible for me, the least interested I am, Six Siege, because of that concern about whether it'll hit the table, would be my lowest pick. I have a bunch of skirmish games. In fact, I'd argue it's fighting for space with Rum and Bones. Rum and Bones is going to be the other 2-hour-long, 2-player skirmish game that I really enjoy. Very different in their execution and the way they feel, but both excellent experiences that don't hit the table as often as, Rum and Bones I play once or twice a year. Such a great game. It's a shame. Then from there we have Wild Ascent. Wild Ascent is going to be the second lowest. And you're like, well, Alex, I thought you loved Wild Ascent. These are all 5 out of 5s. I love all of these games, okay? They're all, don't take its ranking on the list as anything other than this is an amazing game that I'm choosing from other amazing games. But yeah, Wild Ascent would be the next one lowest on the list because of the fact that it's a campaign game. So yeah, as much as I love Wild Ascent, it is a campaign game. It's one that I played through it already. I will play it again, but that commitment of getting 10 games in every single time I play it does mean that it ranks a little bit lower on this list. From there we have Mosaic, and by the way, I know Primal is a campaign game. We'll come back to it. From there we have Mosaic. Mosaic, for all that I enjoyed Mosaic, and I do enjoy Mosaic, at the end of the day, it is basically to me the poor man's Terraforming Mars. So why do I want Mosaic in my collection? Because Mosaic, while it is the poor man's Terraforming Mars, at least for ourselves, for our game group, and I'm saying this because I get the comment every time, our games of Terraforming Mars generally last 3 hours plus. Mosaic, I can knock out in 90 minutes to 2 hours. It is a very different feeling, a very different experience in terms of, sure, it's not as rewarding as Terraforming Mars, but it plays in half the time, and so I still want this in my collection, but I would get rid of it before the other ones above it because of that Terraforming Mars aspect, specifically Terraforming Mars. Next up, we have Fall of the Mountain King. Fall of the Mountain King would be my next choice. Fall of the Mountain King comes in at a reasonable 90 minutes to 2 hour playtime. A solid game, solid area control, lots of fun things going on. It is ahead of Six Siege, ahead of Wild Ascent, ahead of Mosaic, but it's below the rest because as much as I like it, the one aspect of Fall of the Mountain King that I didn't love is going to be that gnome track. The gnome track to me felt a little fiddly, a little out of place in an otherwise amazing experience. And it's just enough of an out of place that while I like Fall of the Mountain King quite a bit, I'm willing to put it a little bit lower than the others. And also because, by the way, I have a lot of area control games, a lot of amazing area control games. In fact, speaking of 5 out of 5s coming soon, I probably will have another area control game in a month or two that is also going to be a 5 out of 5. I just need more plays, but we'll get to it. From there we have Primal. Primal should get dinged because it's a campaign game. To a certain extent, it should. But to begin with, it is my only boss monster game that I currently have. I have Townsville Tussle coming, I guess. But in terms of games in my house, it's the only one I actually have currently in my house that is a boss hunting experience. And I really, really love it. Like, to no end. I mean, this is my favorite boss hunter game that I've played so far. I like Townsville Tussle. I like Oathsworn. I've played them both. I'm looking forward to both of them. But I love Primal. Primal is so rewarding, the card play it gives. I love Marvel Champions. I adore that game, and Primal gave me that game along with a boss hunting experience. It is so excellent, so rewarding to play through, that despite the fact that it is a campaign game, it still manages to be fairly high on this list of 5 out of 5s. And a 4 out of 5 too, just because. From there we have Destinies. Destinies ranks above Primal, not because the gameplay is better. The gameplay is much worse. In fact, if I had to choose between one of these, the only reason I'm choosing Destinies is because as much as I love Primal, I do know that campaign aspect of Primal will make it harder to hit the table on a regular basis. It doesn't matter that I like Primal much more than I like Destinies, much more. Destinies, I can knock out a game here and there. There's always that aspect of accessibility comes into play. Sure, as a game, Primal is so much better than Destinies, at least for myself, that is. But Destinies, I'll play more often. I'll be able to table it whenever I want because it's simply just set up a scenario, set up a few players, play for 90 minutes, call it a day, and move on. You can jump back in next time with your characters, with the same people, the same game, or different players entirely. It is not a campaign-driven experience. And Destinies is so good at what it's doing. Destinies is such an immersive storytelling game. I have really enjoyed my play of Destinies. I have complaints. I gave those complaints over in the review. But nonetheless, I find myself always looking forward to the next play of Destinies. I find myself thinking of, well, I want to get it to the table again and go through the next adventure. And I want them to put out more content for this game because I want to experience all that content. The fact that Destinies is in my head when I'm not playing it, to be fair, many of these games are in my head when I'm not playing them, but Destinies is very much in my head when I'm not playing it. That's why Destinies is higher than Primal. Which brings us to The Witcher. The Witcher, and by now you should know what my number one pick is, just by process of elimination. But The Witcher is my number two pick. The Witcher is a one-shot game. The gameplay aspect I enjoyed more than Destinies. The one-shot game means it's not lower on this rank than the rest. And the fact that I don't have a single other game that falls into the category of an adventure game the same way The Witcher does. I think I could argue Western Legends is likely the only other game in my collection currently that gives me that adventure feel the way The Witcher does. And I would say The Witcher does it much, much better, at least so far. I'm only one play into Western Legends, so I have to wait a bit more, but as of right now, no other game in my collection gives me that adventure feel, that travel around the board and level up. I've played other games, but I've gotten rid of them. They always didn't last for one reason or another, and The Witcher currently, I believe, will last. All my complaints about The Witcher, and I had complaints, genuine complaints. In my review, I said that The Witcher is a 5 with the very strong potential of dropping down to a 4 because of those complaints and critiques I have. And yet the Kickstarter, with all the free expansions you got at the base pledge, addressed and answered every single one of those complaints. The monsters now feel different. The cards are more advanced. Everything I wanted from the game was given to me in the Kickstarter. And so while I haven't played with them, it's a big caveat there, I haven't played with those things, I am very optimistic that The Witcher will take its 5 and solidly lock it in and go even higher as opposed to going down. And then lastly, and this is almost embarrassing for a channel that is, I mean, my channel is very Kickstarter focused, right? Very Kickstarter focused. I talk a lot about Kickstarter games. I have plenty of games in my collection that are in Kickstarters. But for a list of 8 different games, 8 games that are all amazing experiences, the one that ranks the highest is the retail game for me. Aquatica, if I had to choose, and again, this isn't the gameplay alone. Gameplay alone, there are games here I prefer more than Aquatica. But the combination of gameplay, accessibility, all those things that lead me down a pathway to saying, if I had to choose one of these games and only one of these games, which one would I pick? Yeah, it'd be the retail game over here. Aquatica is just so much fun. I have played this more than any other game on this list over here. I've enjoyed every single play, and every time I dive back into it, pun not intended, every time I dive back into Aquatica, I have fun with it. I'm always eager to bring it out. I hope there's more expansion content for this game. I am really enjoying my plays of Aquatica. It is the retail game. The $30, well, you get the expansion too, whatever it is. I don't know the exact price point, but the base game plus expansion is still going to be cheaper than basically anything else on this list, or at least anything else on this list at its Kickstarter price for all the content you get. And yet it is the number one pick from all these games for me. This is a sampling of my favorite games of 2021 so far. These are my hits of the year. If I do a list at the end of the year of, my top highlights in 2021, you can expect to see most, if not all, of these games on that list. There are a lot of fun games that I get to play, a lot of fun experiences. But these are definitely the best new experiences I've had in 2021 so far. I hope in some way you found this list interesting, the comparisons, the choices, the reasons I picked one over the other, and the reasons why perhaps one may or may not be a better game for you in your collection. But ultimately, all of these are available in one form or another, or all of these will soon be available if they aren't currently. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.